mental distress. Very angry. I felt like I wanted to cry, like I wanted to throw up. Hello vlog, welcome back. This is taking CDCA Restorative. I don't even know if I'm gonna post this because I don't know how the results are gonna go. And you all know what happened with the first round of CDCA. I had to retake endo, and I mean, it was literally fine. Great learning experience, and I felt like me being asked to retake it was definitely justified because I had a misconception about the rubric and I did something wrong. So therefore I had to redo it, and then I did it right and passed. So if it comes around that a retake is needed for restorative, I'm sure in the end it'll all be okay, but right now that's the last thing I want. I'm really trying to put out the good energy and the positive self-talk that I'm going to pass this one on the first attempt, and I want to take you all with me to practice for CDCA. So I'm headed to the school right now. As I said, it's Saturday, and I'm going to practice today and then probably again tomorrow and then one more time this week. They give us 2 of each of the practice teeth, so 8 teeth total. They have simulated caries, and then you go ahead and you drill to the ideal dimensions, and then once you get to ideal, you would have to ask the examiner for an extension from 0.5 millimeter up to 1 millimeter in a specific direction because of caries or because of whatever you think you need to extend for. Then they either approve it or deny it, and then if they approve it, you go ahead and extend, and then you might have to ask again and again and again and again, so sometimes that can be a little tricky. But basically, you need to remove all the caries in order to pass the caries removal portion, and then you need to restore correctly, smooth looking, a nice, firm, but not too firm contact. So I'm gonna take you all with me. I'll show you all the simulated caries teeth. I will walk you through some of the struggles I've been having with these typodonts because they have made me very angry. I do not like these simulated caries teeth. I think they're very, very, very hard to work on. But you know, let's go and let's just be very vulnerable and honest about how CDCA and practicing and finishing off 4th year can feel at times. Okay, so I'm set up in the sim lab because we don't have curing lights upstairs. We have to use the sim lab ones on the weekends because dispensing isn't open, but here are some of the ones I filled last time. So I didn't have a good burr to smooth out the edges, but turned out fine. You can see how it's over contoured, so the contacts are super tight. Same for this one, the contact was really tight, and for this one as well. Even though the contour looks pretty good on the anteriors, obviously this one is over contoured, so it's not surprising that the contact was too tight. Those are the ones I've prepped and filled so far. For context, here's an unprepped one. From the occlusal you can't really see, so once it's screwed in place you can't see, but here you can see the caries is on the distal of 30. If you see that dark staining, this will be an MO on 20, and these are still in the bag, but you can see the mesial caries, the distal caries on the incisors are there. So you can see them pretty well before you screw them in, but you can't really see the caries in place. The real test is going to have a radiograph we look at and then write it down, but they told us on the real test the molar is going to be an MO and the premolar will be a DO, so hopefully that's true, but either way you'll have a radiograph to diagnose it. You'll write it down on your candidate sheet, and that's what you'd be prepping based on whatever you say it is from the radiograph. But in these teeth, you just have to look clinically. Basically, all the practice teeth they gave us are like opposite of what the real exam should be. So molar DO and premolar MO to practice, but the real test is going to be the opposite. It's a little annoying. I wish it was just the same teeth at that point, but same kind of concepts, except 30 DO is much more challenging than 30 MO, if we're being honest. I think we can all agree on that. I'm going to get everything set up here, remounted, and then I'm also going to do some drawings for the ideals on my manual here that we're allowed to bring in. We're allowed to bring in your rubric and the full manual with any handwritten drawings that you want to. So some of the problems I was having is that everyone told me to use fender wedges like these, and they do not fit. The teeth are way too tight in there. But what did work was tips from people at other schools told me to use a Toffelmeyer in there, and it fit perfectly, as you can see here. So this is when I started prepping 8. You can barely see a little bit of shadow when you first get in there. As you get deeper, you start to see the discoloration more, and then eventually you can feel that it's kind of sticky as you keep going. In this case, you can see, okay, it's still dark. I'm going to need to extend past the ideal, and at that point you would ask for a modification. You can see in the finished prep the difference in the color of the dentin, that it's nice and normal looking compared to stained or having the white flecks, stickiness coming off of it. And then I went ahead and restored it as well. And then this is me trying to show you that it has a nice contact, except I was filming with one hand and having to pull the floss with the other hand. This is going to give you a similar perspective for the premolar. You can see that dark shadowing when I started my prep towards ideal. Again, you want to make sure you prep all the way to ideal before you ask for extensions. And then you can see here when it's completely free of the caries. And I went ahead and used a Garrison matrix system to restore. I didn't love the Garrison for these teeth. Honestly, all of my contacts were a little too tight, so I would recommend looking into the disposable matrix. I just didn't have time to practice with it and didn't want to mess it up on test day. It's the next day, back in the lab again, getting everything set up to practice, this time the lateral incisor and then the molar for the class 2. Back at it again, the Tafelmeyer fit nicely with the lateral as well. If you can't get it in there, use the college pliers in the embrasure space and pull with one hand and then slide the Tafelmeyer in with your other hand. And again, this lateral had pretty large caries for our practice tooth, so you can see how it progresses as I get deeper and deeper. When you initially prepped, you didn't really see it, and then you start to really see it. By the time I was able to restore, I made sure I got my mylar strip in there with a wedge, and then went ahead and restored. Again, all of my contacts were really tight on all of these practice teeth, and it was pretty similar on test day, to be honest. And then I'm showing you all what the caries looked like in the molar, and as I expanded my prep towards ideal, and then decided if I would have needed to ask for modifications or not, and then the restored molar. Good morning. Happy Monday. This was the week of the exam, and I only had one practice tooth left, but I went up into the clinic to do this one, so it was most realistic to our actual exam. Got everything set up, put on my rubber dam, and prepped the premolar and then restored it. I was really confident with my premolars, I would say more than my molars, so I was really crossing my fingers that test day we would get another premolar. Fellow D4s, you do not want to miss out on this opportunity. Be sure to go to Dentist Job Connect using the form specifically in my description to let them know that I sent you. There are so many listings for associate jobs for general dentists. If you're anything like me, you're taking the boards and you're hoping you can graduate and find an amazing associate job. There are tons of options. You can sort by location, you can sort by pay range. Anything you need is right at your fingertips. And again, be sure to go to the link in the description to find out more and sign up. Huge thank you to Dental Nachos and Dentist Job Connect for working with me across my platforms. You can tell by this terrible lighting that it is 6 a.m. on test day. I'm about to drive over to school. We're supposed to be there at 6:30. The exam starts at 8 and goes until 3. I honestly feel totally normal, like I'm going in for any other type of exam. Like a test case at school or a practical. Obviously there's some adrenaline and everything, but I wouldn't say I have any like negative anxiety symptoms that I sometimes get from other things. So I'm just really telling myself I know how to do a prep and restoration, and anything that comes my way, we're just gonna problem solve and work through it just like it's a real patient, and the results will come as they come, and whatever happens, happens. But I am telling myself I'm gonna pass, manifesting that pass. 2:30 and I'm in my car, I'm finished. I turned in my final thing for grading at 2 o'clock. So within that time, they graded it, gave it back to me, did my checkout, I cleaned up my cube, and now I'm in my car to head home. But let's recap a little bit because it was a bit of a roller coaster. So I decided to start with the anterior. So you let the floor examiner know when you're checking everything in, you get a radiograph and you have to diagnose the caries in terms of the surfaces, so MO, DO, ML, DL, depending if it's anterior or posterior. You write that on your sheet. They say if you got it right or not. If you got it wrong, you do get one more try, but you got a point deduction. Mine were right, thankfully. And then from there, you go ahead and finish mounting everything, and you're just kind of waiting until the start time. As I mentioned, we arrive at 6:30 a.m. All of that time until around 7, you're just kind of setting up, and then at 7, they start checking everyone in, doing the radiographs, filling out your sheets. And then anywhere between 7 and 7:45, you've been checked in, so then you can go converse with classmates, meditate, whatever you want to do until the exam starts at 8. So I had about 30 minutes to just chat with classmates because I didn't want to be sitting in silence. I knew I was already going to be doing a lot of that during the exam. So we went ahead and started with the anterior. I would say my caries were pretty moderate. I took my beautiful sheet here from clinic so I could remember all the different extensions I needed. So we started at 8 a.m. and I asked for 2 modifications at 8:30 a.m. One was the facial wall, one was the axial wall, and then that was back to me 10 minutes later. And then I asked for my next set of extensions at 9 a.m., so 20 minutes later, to remove unsupported facial enamel. Thankfully, all of mine throughout that process for the anterior were approved, so that keeps it a little less stressful, and it's a little reaffirming that you can diagnose the caries correctly, you're feeling it correctly clinically, you know what you're supposed to be doing because they're agreeing with you. That's all very helpful. So I sent that second mods in at 9, got that back again 10 minutes later. I've heard people complain about the pace of the modification grading, but for us, it was all very fair. Modification was about 10 minutes, and a full grade for finishing prep or resto was about 20 minutes. So I got the anterior prep back after my second modification was approved around 9:10, and then I finished at 9:25. So really from 8 to 9:25, I was doing the prep with the bits of downtime. So for me, I'd say I'm usually a fairly quick dentist for preps and fills and everything. But of course, you're really taking your time, you're checking everything, you're checking it 3 times over because you really want to pass on this first time around. So it was being very meticulous, and obviously that takes longer, plus you have that downtime while you're waiting for things to get approved or not. And then I sent that for grading, and I was able to start my filling 9:40 a.m. and then I was done filling it and sending it to be graded about 15 minutes later. My anterior prep and fill I was very happy with. I thought everything was straightforward. It felt a lot like our practice. I knew when I needed to extend beyond the ideal and get those modifications. They were all approved, like I said, which was reassuring. And my fill was pretty straightforward. I thought it looked really nice. So that kind of boosted my morale going into the second part of the day, which was the Class 2 Posterior. I was able to start at 10:12, so just about 10:15. And I thought it would take me maybe an hour and a half, being meticulous and taking longer than I normally do. I had this tooth for prep from 10:12 until 1 p.m. So long. It was terrible. And at first it felt fine. I was finding the caries. I was like, okay, like I see the caries they want me to get and should be pretty straightforward. Might have to extend a little bit here, a little bit there. So then I got everything to ideal, and I sent in my first round of modification requests, and I honestly thought after that I would extend the amount that was in my modification and then I'd be done. But after that, everything just started to go south. Every time I was expanding more and getting more caries out, I was finding new issues. Lots of just weird like explorer sticks, like right at the DEJ at different spots around the tooth, whether it's the buccal wall or the lingual wall, or the caries that I knew I had, which was, for me, it was more axial buccal, like on the gingival floor kind of area. So I was really extending into the buccal area as well as axially. So I ended up getting 5 modifications total for that tooth, sent at 3 different times. So as I said, I started the prep at 10:12, and then I got my first modification sent off at 10:53, and I just sent for 1 modification at that point. They came back 10 minutes later. I kept going until 11:40, so that was about 35 minutes that I had this, and that was probably the 35 minutes of me in mental distress. I felt like I wanted to cry, like I wanted to throw up. It was just like, is this really going wrong? Why is this happening? Oh no, like, well, this is just too much. I'm annoyed that I have to ask for more mods. What if the caries keeps going and keeps going? Why are they just like explored pricks? Is it just a defect in the tooth, or is it actually caries? Is it just a hole, or is it actually caries because these are simulated teeth? And it was just unpleasant, to be honest. It was a very hard, unpleasant moment, probably in those about 35 minutes or so. And they also had a glitch with the digital system of like allowing me to get my next set of mods that probably made things take a lot longer, like 10 extra minutes. So at that point, I realized that I had caries in different spots than the spot I originally was going into. So there was additional areas that I needed to get modifications for. At that point, I was asking for the buccal wall more and the lingual wall because I was getting catches there as well. And that one took 15 minutes to get back because of that little like glitch I was telling you about. And so I started again right around 12 o'clock, and at that point I asked for 2 more. So I asked to extend even more than I already was. I had extended the pulpal floor once. I needed to extend it again, which, you know, when you're extending the pulpal floor, you're getting closer to the pulp, so that was a little stressful. It was more in the mesial pit area, so it wasn't so much right over the pulp chamber, but it was still stressful. So those are my 3rd set of mods, and that was my 4th and 5th total one. So at that point, I got it back around 12:40, and then I was finished with the prep at 1 o'clock. So those last 20 minutes was where things started to turn around. Once I had gotten the decay out of those 4th and 5th modification spots, it finally was starting to look cleaner. Honestly, I was happy with the way it looked at the end. I thought it did pretty well for most of the rubric. And you know, once you have the extensions, you're going beyond acceptable in the rubric, the amount that they allowed you to. So I don't think I'm beyond any of what the criteria is allowing me, but I'm just worried that there might still be caries that are just hard to see, and like a hole or like the white kind of demon along the like DEJ that just seems to be like the junction of the way these teeth come together. So I just don't know. I feel, I would say like 70% good about the prep in the end. During it, as I said, awful. Like, it's not like I thought I was gonna fail. I was just like, when is this ever gonna get better? I'm running out of time. I almost took the full amount of time that they give you just because of how long the prep checks were taking and the little glitch, and then needing so many different modifications. So way, way, way harder and longer than I was anticipating, especially looking at the tooth clinically. You can see the shadowing of where the decay probably is looking at the tooth in the mouth, and it just was bigger than it seemed. And really the hardest part was that there were so many different spots and they all needed extensions beyond the ideal. So when that was done, life was a little bit better around 1 o'clock. So then I was able to get my prep graded. And again, you don't know any of the grades. It just gets sent away and it gets graded. And then I was able to get my type it on back and start my restoration at 1:20. And we had until 3 o'clock. So I was doing okay on time at this point, but I still thought I would be out of there by like 1:30, not just starting my restoration. And I finished my restoration at 2. I was probably filled within 10 minutes, but then I was just finicking with it a lot. An issue I've been having with these typodont teeth is that the contact is very over bulked when you look in interproximally. It just looks kind of ugly. So I tried to get in there and shave it down a little, but I didn't want to risk like opening any of the margins or just damaging anything. So I really only did it a tiny bit. It's still definitely over bulked. So that's one thing I'm worried about. That's not like a specific criteria though in the contact itself. So I'm hoping it's fine. It flosses nicely. Occlusion is good. It looks smooth. I think that's more what they look at, is the contact closed. How does it look overall? And I think it looks good. So I'm more like 85% feeling good about that. Anterior, again, don't want to jinx it, but feel totally good about those as well. So we'll just have to see how things play out. Today's Saturday, if I didn't mention that. I was assigned today, and then some classmates are assigned tomorrow, but everyone is done Saturday or Sunday. And then they said we'll probably get our results back Monday. So we're gonna pass. Like I said, I've been trying to have the most positive energy that I can, and I did my very best. I would pass everything that I turned in, so hopefully the examiners feel the same way.